Welcome in. I know we haven't had a chance to talk until just now, after like Race to World First is over, but previously we had a whole conversation, the three of us, about how Preservation Evoker was. So now I kind of wanted to do a little check-in and see how you guys are feeling now that Race to World First has ended, and you guys are continuing on with, your prog and your own goals and everything for 10-2. So, welcome in. Let's introduce ourselves, starting with Voulk.
I am a Voulk. I am the Wildhead and Preservation and Resto Druid rider, and I also maintain Questionably Epic and Questionably Epic Live. You might also see me around Discords.
Which Discords?
Let's just say all of them.
Yeah, everywhere.
It's
Love
more
to see,
convenient, yeah.
love to see it. And UT?
My name's Youtee. I raid with Speakeasy, or now Speak, on Thrall. Started out playing Prez in early alpha and beta, and just kind of always stuck with it since. And I've been so fortunate to been able to work with Voulk.
Last time we had one of these conversations,
Yeah.
Preservation ate an 8% nerf a couple of days after via our tier set, so I'm a little cautious around this one.
Right, right. So,
I don't want to draw any
let's talk about that.
conclusions, but
Of course, we would never want to do any of that. But let's talk about that because we had or you guys are talking about having a lot of high hopes for where Preservation was going. And now let's talk about the sum of it. They ate some nerfs, and we didn't see them represented at all for like the Race to World First.
hey, BDGG had one, so technically, if you
True.
look at the world top 10, there's one in 11th.
I mean, yeah, we'll
But
take those.
yeah,
We'll take
it didn't
those.
see a lot of play. I think that was kind of expected. I think the healing comp of a disc or two, a Mistweaver, and a Holy Paladin was pretty expected going in. Now that we've seen some of the raid fights, I probably would have adjusted Preservation down even more. I think that, and we're going to cover a lot of this, I'm sure, but this raid in particular isn't that friendly to Preservation. Like the range is a bigger issue than it's ever been before, and we'll talk about that for sure. And Mistweaver and Disc Priest are really strong.
Right. And
So strong.
yeah,
So
yeah, go ahead.
strong that unfortunately I did swap off of my Evoker this tier to Mistweaver.
Damn. Okay.
Yep.
So, what are you progressing on right now?
Right now we're doing Tindril. We raid tomorrow, and Saturday we'll probably kill Tindril.
Are you still playing Preservation Volk?
I am, yes.
Okay. Doing Tindril as well?
We are halfway through Smolder on right now.
Ah, okay. So what's the comp that you're running with right now, and how's that been feeling?
We're running a probably quite unique comp if you compare to World First, but I don't think it's too bad. It's Preservation, Resto Druid, Disc Priest, Holy Paladin, and Mistweaver Monk. So we've got a five healer team, and we just rotate depending on who's good for a fight.
Yeah. Okay, so how has Preservation really fit into these raid fights with its like healing profile? It seemed like Race World First featured a lot of like the ramp specs of Mistweaver and Disc Priest. So where does Preservation really fit in, just kind of in general, for its healing profile now?
A little bit awkward. So Blossom is by far the most common build. It's really good at stacked healing. It does reasonable burst, but it has real problem on a fight like Nimue, where you're very spread out. And I haven't done Tindril yet, but I imagine that's going to be quite entertaining as well. Farak Phase 3 is a good example, where you just aren't getting very good value out of your core build.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier in the raid, you do have some decent fights. Even like Smolderon, it's not too bad. But yeah, I think overall the preservation profile hasn't been that good. I've actually been playing an Echo build for most fights, and I think that actually suits the raid way better. It's going to take a little while, I think, for people to slowly start adopting it, but I think you'll see a lot of it.
So what spells are you replicating when you're playing an Echo setup?
We're back to Lifebind. You're actually a lot more flexible than
Ah.
you've ever been before.
Mm-hmm.
On Nimue, for example, you'll echo Dream Breath and even a little bit of Reversion. On Smolderon or like Agira for people starting out the raid, Lifebind is very good. You pretty much just wait for spares to go out and then immediately Lifebind all of the damage before anyone else can heal it. And so Echo build kind of is doing really well from a playstyle perspective because last year you were really shoehorned in, right, to echoing Spirit Blooms since it was just the best choice
Mm-hmm.
by a massive margin most of the time. Whereas now you've got a lot of choice. Like even on the same fight, you can echo 3 or 4 different spells throughout, even if Lifebind and Dream Breath are like your go-tos.
So let's talk about that. How is it relating with like the new tier set? Because this is the empowers giving you additional echoes. So how is that fitting into either like an echo playstyle like you talked about, or like a Blossom playstyle before? Is it synergistic? Does it feel good compared to the other ones?
Yeah, so Blossom just uses it to farm. I'll let Youtee go into how Blossom uses it, but you're basically just farming Essence Burst.
Yeah, so a Blossoms kind of style is you play how you normally play Blossoms last year, which is just you drop your Blossoms, but now you can press an Empower before. And after you press your Empower, you're going to friendly Living Flame somebody in case you get any procs off your Empower for more procs and just spam more Blossoms.
It's really just Emerald Blossom all the way down,
yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the big issue with how that plays right now is Blossoms is probably like the most feast or famine spec of any spec in the game right now. It's either you get procs and you do a ton of healing, or you don't get procs and then you watch people die, and gets very frustrating after 100+ pulls into a boss, and it's just like 3 pulls ago I saved somebody there. This pull I lost 3 50/50s in a row, and now we're just kind of dying because more than half of your output is one button, and if you don't have any resources to press that button, yeah.
It's a funny spec, isn't it? You're either pressing Blossom or you're pressing a button that might give you a Blossom.
Yeah.
And so we also have a lot of burst damage in this raid as well. And so even if you're getting the procs a little bit later on, then if it's not hitting the timings that you want, then you're even further behind.
Exactly, yeah. And you really want to get those procs too for those burst damage, because you can feed your big cooldowns like Rewind or Dreamflight into your Blossoms with Cycle of Life, but it's not as important as it was last year. It wasn't even important last year. There was just a bigger, it just soaked more healing last year. But it was very frustrating for me on Nimue, where Blossoms felt terrible to play because everybody's around everywhere, and Echo's kind of like, yeah, I do no healing for 12 seconds while I'm trying to get Echoes out, and then I do Dream Breath or whatever, but by then, I have a Resto Shaman, he's pressing Chain Heal, so all that healing's kind of gone already. So
right,
that was...
Well, you have a Resto Shaman. Oof,
yeah,
our
our first kill on Smolderon took us 70 pulls, and we had Preservoker, Mistweaver, Resto Shaman, Disc Priest, no Holy Paladin. Gold first, baby.
I like it.
Nice.
I like it.
And yeah, it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the start of the expansion, Preservation was really getting this like ramp play style off like Temporal Anomaly Echoes, Lifebind combos, all this setup where they could just crank faster burst healing than most everybody else. But now that's kind of eroded over the course of the expansion. Is this the worst of the healing profiles that Evoker's facing right now? Or do you guys think differently?
Well, the Lifebind style that recently has been uncovered and is actually working really well kind of brings us back to that style. It's not as strong because we're not ramping on the full 20 people every 20 seconds.
Yeah.
And also,
they hit coverage for sure.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have 5 targets on your TA anymore, on your Temporal Anomaly, sorry. You do have tier set giving you some echoes, so you get a little bit from that. But yeah, it's not the same. I would say it's probably the weakest it's been of the 3 tiers.
And so how is it comparing as well with, your experience as Youtee playing Mistweaver, where if this Echo playstyle is coming more to the forefront to adapt to the range issues that we're having out of Amir Jasil, is it just more work than a Mistweaver's giving you for possibly less output, or is it comparable?
So the Lifebind build itself is, it's really good. I think I definitely get more out of my Mistweaver currently. I actually ran the Lifebind build this week on my Voker in our second raid team because they needed me to fill in, and it worked very well. But fights like Laredar, a fight like Laredar or even Mythic Farak, like Voker's terrible at spot healing. Like prolonged single target healing is awful. So dropping the Mistweaver would be pretty much almost trolling.
Yeah, and it seems like going into the season, there was a really big round of healer nerfs where they're saying, we're going to nerf everyone's AoE output, but we're going to give everybody a bit better single target. Noticeably, Evoker was really absent from like all of those changes. And now we're going into a raid fight with a lot of single target required for ads in particular.
It's just awkward, right? Because like they buffed Living Flames healing, but it's slow and it still doesn't heal for a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's not a great solution to sit there living flaming someone at 2 seconds a cast
Yeah,
on a
and
spec that hates haste. Like it's a real drag.
like we have a lot of single target heals with Living Flame, Verdant Embrace, Spirit Bloom. They do very little healing. They have a long cast time, and so they don't really cost a lot of mana. We don't have a way to dump mana into people like a single target like Mistweaver does. Mistweaver can sit there and just blast out Vivifies, eat their entire mana bar and then drink it all back. But it does the healing you want it to do. You're spending your mana how you want to, and it just really benefited them along with their tier set, making
It
them,
is just a tuning issue as
Yeah.
well, though, right? Like every evoker has a story about how they did the same healing as their Mistweaver monk, and then they went to their passes and they got like an orange, and the Mistweaver is gray.
Yeah. Have we had a Prevoker kill Farak yet? One, maybe? I don't think so.
I think Northern Sky are going to be the first. I don't think they've killed it yet. I stopped keeping track, but yeah, definitely not many, potentially none. But also, like, the healer changes in general felt like they had a plan, and so we saw a lot of changes in the first few builds, and then for whatever reason, most specs just stopped getting changes.
Right.
And Preservation barely got any in the first place, but specs like Resto Druid, right, like got a suite of changes, and then they weren't that well received, but all right, there's probably going to be some follow-up, and then follow-up just never really came. Like, we started getting 3% nerfs to specs that were overperforming.
Right.
I don't know what happened there.
I wouldn't say Preservation is really undertuned, because if you buff any of our abilities, it's not like if they buff Emerald Blossoms for whatever god forbidden reason, Blossoms get buffed. It's not going to really do anything because Blossom already does a ton
it's
of
just
overhealing.
Comparative, right?
Yeah.
Like compared to the front runners, it doesn't do as much healing, and so does that mean Preservation is undertuned or those are overtuned? I don't know. I don't think it matters too much, but I don't think the balance was very good this tier.
Right.
I can agree on that. Yeah, the fights just really did not suit us at all either.
It's
whether
true
it be
too,
range or.
But even the fights that do suit us, you'd still probably rather have a Mistweaver.
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't you think the overall design of Preservation makes you sort of shackled by encounter design, or almost at the mercy of it?
It is. I spent all of beta crying about the range issue, right? And I got told that they will just make fights that are fine for a 30-yard range, and then we get fights like Nimue where you just where a 30-yard range is not very good.
Yeah.
All the fights.
Phase 3 where it's a pretty heavy liability, and like what is the upside, right? Like what justifies the range?
Yeah, and this isn't unique as well to other healers. I mean, Paladin in a way has had their own range requirements from their mastery, which took 3-4 years before they actually changed to, what was it, the Beacon of the Lightbringer, so that it's not only your range, but it's also the range of where your beacons are located. But previously they had things like Rule of Law to extend range and extend mastery value. Do you think having something like that as a band-aid of like
at this point I would take anything, Jack?
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything at all. Got it.
I take anything. I think they should just go 40-yard range. I think the spec is very unique. I think it's very interesting to play. I just don't think it serves a very interesting purpose anymore. I think you still have a very unique healing spec at 40 yards, and you'll still have stuff like Dream Breath that's a bit shorter. Your positioning will still be important. But yeah, stuff like Dispels, it's just awkward when you're playing like Farak Phase 2 and you're just out of range of the Dispel that you need to get.
Dropping Blossom on the ads and your raid leader's yelling at you to dispel, and you're, sorry, I'm 40 yards away.
Yeah. Okay, so what about healing profile then? Because notably, Dragonflight raids have been insanely bursty. And what happens if things start slowing down? Is that going to be like a positive or a negative for Preservation?
I think that's a positive for both builds. What do you reckon, Youtee?
Yeah, I definitely think, I mean, we don't always, so when they first made Evoker, it was supposed to be a mid-range mobile burst healer. But we definitely have ways to be that kind of slow healer. I mean, we can just echo Dream Breath or next patch reversion.
Even just like Blossom does very well over time.
Yeah. Cycle of Life gets a ton of value when damage is low.
We'll cover 10-5 probably in a little bit, but like that also introduces some constant healing.
Yep.
Ooh. Okay, so let's talk about that. What do we got?
in season 1 there were kind of 2 builds, right? You had Lifebind, and then eventually they killed Lifebind, so you ran reversion stuff instead. They're turbo buffing all reversion related stuff, and they are nerfing everything else. So the mana cost of all your spells will go up by 10%. In return, you'll get a bunch of reversion buffs like Grace Period, which increases your healing on reversion targets by 10% currently, goes up to 20%, so they're literally just doubling it.
Dang, I didn't even know they had some updates coming for it.
Honestly, they kind of snuck them in. Like, I think they even missed some of the data mining. Like, they were very, very sneaky. Timeless Magic will reduce the mana cost of Temporal Anomaly by 10% if you have a point in it. Oh, and Reversion will have a chance to give you an Essence Burst on cast.
Oh,
So basically,
Reversion's
Reversion's got all this random shit attached to it instead of just being a good hot, but that's okay.
Instead of just buffing reversion and making it not extremely expensive, they just the spell's very, very bloated now. And the thing about Grace Period as well, when you have 2 reversions, a normal reversion and an echoed reversion, that target takes 44% more healing, not just the 20. So that's something
definitely
to think
very
about
interesting,
as well.
and it's probably enough to make reversion builds kind of the go-to. So if you're planning on playing Evoker in the mid patch, then it might be worth just collecting a few crit items as you go.
A lot of crit items.
Okay, so they've already sort of marked the direction where they're headed, right? They're saying seems to be like the path we're taking. Do you guys like this? Is this going to be more positive, help you around with like the healing profiles, or is it like, hey, cool, there's like buffs in this direction? It's not necessarily an upward movement overall, but it's just kind of an upward movement in general.
I'm not particularly positive on the change because I think that reversion has a lot of problems as a spell, and I think that attaching 8 different effects to it makes it difficult to kind of learn because it's not clear what it does. Like, if I have something like rejuvenation, I know it's a hot, right? But reversion's a hot that can give you essence burst that increases your healing on the target, that also heals the damage you've taken in the last 15 seconds. It's just a lot, you know? It gets extended when it crits. It's very hard to explain to someone where its strength is coming from. Like, is it good because it heals? Is it good because it gives you an essence burst?
And how
so
do you...
I think it's just overly complex, and I think it's a direction they're taking a few specs at the moment, where they just add more and more effects to a few abilities instead of just, I don't know, chilling a little bit.
We'll have you on next time for Resto Druid.
Oh my good, I'm ready.
I got you. Okay, so with that kind of coming around the corner, is there anything that they should be focusing on for 10.2.5 and like beyond? What is within their control that they could do to pivot the spec in a positive direction, better direction?
Like 10.2.5 is awkward, right? Because we're probably not going to get the kind of huge changes that we're probably not necessarily looking for, but there's stuff like a talent tree revamp that would be really nice. A lot of our talents right now are kind of very low value. It's a very small tree. It's a restrictive tree. I don't think we'll get that in a mid patch. The only thing I really want from the mid patch is probably higher tuning in general. But I think they should really target a new expansion, or maybe the season 4 patch for like a heavier revamp. Just give us like a Holy Paladin-esque rework where they fixed up the tree a little bit. We probably don't need the 8 consecutive nerfs afterwards, but you know, the tree part was good.
Fair enough. Okay, so what are the big targets for a talent revamp for like War Within? What are like the dead branches of the tree? What kind of play style? Whether it's like having an echo style or a reversion style or a blossom style, like what should win out, or should there just be 3 different should the tree just be wider in general for it?
Now you're talking my language. I have spent many hours thinking about what I would like to see go with this spec, and I feel like we'll have another kind of a roundtable where we'll talk many hours about World Within. But the bottom like third of our tree, like half the points are either bad, useless, never used, or they're bad for one or the other build. I don't know if people remember, but in like 10.0.7, they did a tree rework for dev where they just made some pain points go away and they added more capstones, which would be amazing. I think the biggest thing that would really help this spec, besides a tree revamp, would be just having a consistent way of making essence bursts, or some kind of like, not bad luck protection in a sense, but ways where we can force ourselves with Essence Burst, kind of like we had with our last tier set, the 4-piece. After casting 4 empowered spells, we got 2 Essence Bursts. I think that immediately would make the spec it would flow way better from a Blossom's perspective. Another thing that probably should be looked at, hopefully, would be how Essence Burst affects Echo versus Blossoms, because Blossoms is a 13k mana spell, right? It's very expensive, and so casting your Essence Burst on anything kind of other than Blossom is kind of trolling, unless you're in a very Echo focused build, because Echo costs literally no mana. It's 4,000 mana, and if you cast your Essence Burst on Disintegrate to try and get mana back through Energy Loop, you're actually not gaining as much mana as you would have just spending that Essence Burst on a Blossom. So I think a consistent way of getting Essence Burst would be a massive upgrade for the spec, and taking kind of a look at how those bursts affect Echo versus Blossoms.
They have a lot of dead talents that they should clean out, like Time of Need, the one that summons a little clone of you when someone drops low. That like just, I need to double check. I'm pretty sure that just never got any of the buffs over time. So like it casts Living Flames, but like it doesn't benefit from any Living Flames talents, and it didn't get any of the Living Flames buffs or anything like that. Erasure is just a trap talent. It's been good maybe once all expansion, but that's mostly just farming newbies. Like there's shit all over the tree, honestly. Like if you want, there's like 3 nodes that gate the bottom half of the tree, right? So you have to take some of them, and like Lifebind is good in an Echo build and mostly does nothing in a Blossom build. Call of Ysera is just very good. Punctuality does shit all if you're not playing a very reversion focused build, and so you're kind of forced into taking 1.5 talents you probably don't want. Cycle of Life, which is like your big Emerald Blossom talent, is hard gated by a Reversion talent, a spell that you never cast in a Blossom build, so we're getting 0% value from that all expansion. There's just a lot of, shall we call them beta talents in the tree, like talents that have existed since beta and probably should have been culled at some point, but the tree just never really got looked at. And I think the Evoker dev even may have left the company, and so I'm not sure what direction will be taken in the future, but the tree definitely needs a look at.
All right, so I'm hearing reduce RNG, cut off dead branches. Any third major point?
Just give us some more stuff, like more talent.
Range.
I think,
Range. Don't make it a talent, please.
Yeah, because how has that been shaping up for your Mythic Plus adventures? I know you guys aren't massive M Plus runners, but how has it been shaping up for you in Keys this season?
It's annoying. I think it's worse in Raid, but it's still annoying.
It's definitely very annoying. The first week of doing, 50 plus keys on all of your characters, and you log into like a Throne of Tides last boss on your Evoker, and you're struggling because people are on the other side of the boss. There's pools everywhere, and nobody's soaking, and so people are just dying. And then I just log into my Mistweaver and don't even care. It's frustrating. Can't even think of other bosses right now because Throne of Tides just gave me severe anger during the first week.
I think the last boss in one of the Dawn of the Infinite dungeons.
Yeah, I think both the last bosses are kind of rough if you don't have a coordinated group running around with the Ridicron, people going to the other side.
Like Deos, if you're doing the juggle, and then your comp moves away from you and you can't heal them, and you're just stuck waiting for the ball to drop so that you can run and heal your team.
How has it been healing trash like the Throne of the Tides Absorb? I thought that's what you were going to talk about first.
Oh yeah, there's that as well. Awful, terrible. I mean,
So we have some burst single target healing, right?
Yeah.
Like you can echo into Spirit Bloom. That's actually a lot of healing. It's usually the sustained single target checks that we're not as good at. Like you can definitely throw 500k plus healing into a target short term, but then after that you're dry for 20 seconds.
First week it was like they were like 1.2 million absorbs or something like that.
First week it was very cursed, but also it was very cursed on most healers, to be honest.
Yeah, not my Mistweaver. It's fine with my Mistweaver.
Okay.
How about something like the third boss of Throne, where it's the Shaman, where you need to heal one person a ton when they get the Flame Shock, and then you top them, and then it's another new person, and then another new person.
Honestly, I think Preservation in general is just really good at healing dungeons. Like, there isn't a lot that you can't find a solution to, at least at the key levels I've been doing.
Yeah,
I'm
the
not going to comment on
dispels.
28th. I'll leave that for Eyelash.
Yeah, eyelash can.
True.
I mean, you can just look at Preservation and Mythic Plus right now, and I think it's by far the least represented healer
It's
currently.
tough, right? Like
Yeah.
augmentation's still seeing a lot of play, and you want buffs for your group if you can get them.
I will say the Resosphere nerf in Mythic Plus has been extremely obvious. I didn't think it was going to be that bad because typically your Resosphere always hits you and like your 2 range DPS, and all you have to echo your melee person, and you don't care about the tank because they survive on their own now. But it's actually been really annoying. And speaking of which, a tall Dazar. Oh, what's the name of that boss?
Really?
Vocal. Vocal on a higher tyrannical key is like damn near almost impossible on Evoker, it feels like sometimes. Because your ranger everybody's killing different totems,
Oh,
and
that
you
is
basically
pretty
have to
funny.
be on
Wow.
top of the other totem to heal somebody, and
Just reversion and pray.
reversion and pray, man.
Oh, the nightmare. All right, so what could be changed for preservation for dungeons, or what needs to be changed or addressed for it?
I mean, I think, like Volk said, overall, like Evoker has a lot of tools to deal with a lot of the issues in Mythic Plus that a lot of healers may not be able to deal with. I mean, Stasis is a phenomenal cooldown for Mythic Plus if used properly. You can basically make your group kind of almost immortal to rot damage for a minute and a half if you properly use it with like Dream Breath.
Like, can't we just keep nerfing augmentation? Isn't that like the answer?
That's fair. I mean, honestly, surely they just delete augmentation in 11.0 and make it into a tank spec, right? Haha.
I'm thinking we just keep nerfing augmentation and just see how that goes. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I think we give that a try.
Yeah,
That's fair. That's fair.
They kept doing it to Holy Paladin. Why not?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I kept nerfing Holy Paladin, and in logs currently preservation's under Holy Paladin. So. I think just really the biggest weakness is obviously still range. I think it's actually kind of a really big pain point this season. The damage is fine. Our tier set really actually works really nice in Mythic Plus. It does more damage, does more healing, more procs, whatever. But I really feel like our biggest weakness point in Mythic Plus and in Raid is just the range. It's so awful to play around.
Right.
And there's like no counterplay to it almost
Do you think
most of the time.
the new Evoker div, like range might be looked at? We might actually be in luck here. This could happen.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
Man, this could happen.
watch.
I don't know.
It'll be a capstone.
Oh, to unlock 40-yard range.
Yeah. I mean, Power Nexus is at the top of the tree for Devastation, and for us, it's down on the bottom. So, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, tree's a bit weird. Our tier 3 points aren't very good outside of the capstone, so you'll often actually put more points into tier 2, despite them being tier 3 possibilities, if that makes sense. Like, you'll fatten up the middle of the tree and just put bare minimum into tier 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you get crucified for doing that on some other specs.
Right.
You also
Well-
get crucified in the Discord if you link a build where you have no capstones and all tier 2 talents.
I don't know if that's a uniquely preservation issue, but you do see it sometimes. Learn to use stasis. It's very nice.
Very good.
Disc is run without capstones in some cases. I think I'm running without capstones for
It's-
rack progress.
Well, that's true, but it's a bit different, right? Because like our capstones are like our Evang quality stuff, whereas
That's
like
true.
evangelism is a little bit lower in tier 3 for disc, and like you
Evangelism's
run
at like
without
Lifelines tier.
Exactly. Like I think that it's just
Actually, it's
a
below
little
that. Yeah.
bit different.
Of course, of course.
And
All
like
the
Druid
trees
is
look a
the
little
same,
different.
right? Like yeah, Flourish is not a capstone, even though well, at least it was one of your best points.
Yeah.
Whereas Preservation's got that like alpha version of the talent tree where the capstones are all important and everything else kind of sucks.
True.
So, what are some of the expectations you might have for the War Within for the hero talents? Anything?
Yeah,
in
so we know
particular
what they're
bes-
called, right? It's Chrono Warden and Ruby Adept. We're
Right.
99% sure. And so Chrono Warden is probably quite obvious. It's going to be Echo related stuff, probably. Maybe some Time of Need type things. We have a clone. Hopefully they don't go too far into that. But yeah, you assume that'll be the bronze tree.
Mhm.
Ruby Adept, though, I have no real idea because right now our second build is Blossoms, which is very green thematically. Whereas like Ruby Adept is a lot more of a red kind of flavor. So we'll see.
When I
We
think
only
Ruby
have
had
one red spell. Well, we have 2 red spells: Fire Breath and Living Flame. One of which is a
Right.
heal.
Hey, Renewing
So-
Blaze, don't forget it.
Sure, you are.
There you
Yeah,
go.
you are technically correct. So I'm curious to see what they'll do there, but I have no real predictions. I have no idea.
When I think Ruby Adept, I kind of think like Alex Straza and what she has. So I hope, I said this earlier, I doubt it happens, but like something where we turn into like an enhanced dragon form as like a big cooldown. Kind of like Alex Straza from HOTS. I don't know if you've ever.
You could
She turns
honestly
into a
custom
dragon
make
and
Alex
just.
Straza from HOTS and
Yeah.
pop that in. I think
It'd be
that's very
so
playable.
cool. You just turn into a dragon, your abilities are just enhanced for a short time, and it's kind of a
you have
longer
40-yard
cooldown.
range for a short time. I can see it now.
no!
Oh, there it is. That's how you'll get the range.
But it's cool to think about. You know, we will have probably a very time-heavy build with our hero talents, with the Chrono Warden, and then maybe like a more damaged or some kind of living flame, hopefully dragon form kind of something with the Ruby Adept.
Yeah, do you
Maybe
feel
let's get
like
a new red spell?
do you feel like preservation is lacking by not having like a wings or an incarn kind of form for it? Or do you want to just have it as an option with hero talents?
I don't think we're lacking without those because we have stasis, which I mean you could kind of consider that.
True.
Yeah, I think I'm good with that one. Like, it's always awkward when you talk about balance, right? Because in season 1 we were ridiculously overpowered without anything like that, and season 2 we were kind of well balanced, I'd probably say, and now we're quite. So we've kind of been all across the spectrum, and
Yeah.
we haven't had it the whole time. I think they're a bit boring in general, to be honest. Like, I think that particularly wings now, like, it's partially because of the 8 nerfs that we talked about earlier, but
Yep.
just not that
Wings-
interesting anymore. I think something like stasis is much better ground.
Yeah, pressing wings does not feel very rewarding anymore. It's not like, oh, my group is dying, I press wings and suddenly I'm a god. It's like I press wings on cooldown because I want to do a little more damage and have more crits for whatever reason.
You're
Sure.
well prepared for the paladin version of this.
Yeah. And so that's the thing that preservation doesn't have a problem with. They are the brand new spec, the brand new class of the expansion, and they don't have all of this like history with like paladin sort of like lagging behind. You have glimmer, you have wings, you have all your caster spells, you have all of these things they're trying to shove into one spec, whereas preservation's like 70-80% passive of talents. Do you think there's going to be much of a push for you guys to like add more new abilities for next expansion, or is it just to make sure the different builds that exist right now feel distinct, flow better, work better?
I would like new abilities because right now they're using the same 2 or 3 abilities as hooks for like 20 effects. We're looking at Verdant Embrace earlier. It's got like 4 effects dangling off it depending on your talents.
Mm-hmm.
I think that adding a new spell, maybe a red one, if Ruby Adept is going to be a thing, would help them balance that stuff a little bit so that when you press a heal, you get a heal. You don't just, like Verdant Embrace, I press into myself at 100% overheal because I want the 5 things attached to it, not because I want to use it for the button that it is.
Yeah, you also use it because you don't want to jump onto somebody else and jump into a mechanic
Does
and
have some
instantly give
usability issues
yourself.
as well, yeah.
Yeah. I think a new ability would definitely be, or some new abilities would be kind of cool. It'd be very kind of, I think the spec would start to get very complex with how stasis works and how echo works, where a few new abilities might make the pickup for new players, especially an echo kind of focus build, might be kind of difficult, but it would be super interesting to see, play around with, and teach people. So I'm all for it.
Awesome. Any other final thoughts you guys have for what preservation needs, how it feels right now?
Range.
I think that everyone who is currently playing a Blossoms build should at least check out Echo on farm because it's competitive and throughput, and you'll become a better healer if you can play 2 builds at the same time, since it lets you adapt to the fight a little bit. All the people playing Blossom on Nimue is slowly killing me. But I also want to emphasize, like, I feel like we've been a little bit negative, and it's mostly for power-related reasons. But the spec still plays really well. It's still really fun. So if you are playing Evoker, like, don't feel bad about that.
Spec's not in a bad spot at all. It's just, you know, there's some
It's very fun to play.
Yeah, it's very fun to play. I have some small gameplay issues with it, like being very, very RNG dependent in a Blossoms build. But I still love the spec. I'm very sad that I'm not playing it currently in my main raid, but still do every single day log into my Voker and
Gonna beat
dream of the
Mistweaver
days
out
that
of
will
you.
be. Yeah. Soon. Surely when reversion comes back around and I have 14k crit to make reversion a good spell.
Okay,
There
don't
you
swap
go.
then. Don't swap back to it when the spec's at its worst.
Perfect.
But-
Well, thank you so much for being on, guys. Any
Yeah,
other...
thank you.
Thanks
Yeah.
for having us.
Of course. You guys can check them out. I'll have like the socials and everything like that linked in the description below. Give them a shout out. Definitely check out Quest of the Epic. And you guys are both on Wormra's Temple as well, Discord, right?
Of
We are.
course.
Wonderful.
The help desk.
There it is. Go bring all of your Blossom Nimue logs to them, all right?
Oh no.
Thanks
Thank
so
you
much,
again,
guys.
Jack. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Alright.
See ya.
Later, bros.
Peace.